here on Zoom. And thank you so much to those who are viewing live on the Drill's YouTube channel. My name is Sazizo, and I'm one of the co-organisers for the Drill. And before we get on with today's main event and the discussion, we're just going to go through a few house rules with you. So just to let you know, as I've already mentioned, that this event is being streamed live on YouTube, and the YouTube stream of the event will be captioned. So if you do prefer captions, then do click on the CC button and they should come up as well. Of course, it's being captioned using artificial intelligence, so it may not be accurate at all times. And then just to let you know about cameras, some event attendees may be using an internet connection with a low bandwidth. So just to ensure that everyone can experience okay, we do ask that you keep your cameras off during the presentations, but you can switch on your cameras during the Q&A session when it is time to speak as well. The same with microphones, just to keep background noise to a minimum. Just do make sure that you are on mute, that your microphone is muted when you're not speaking. And so today's event will be a moderated conversation between Innocent, the founder of the Drill, and our guest speaker Adéọlá as well. And just to let you know that there will be Q&A during the end, so you'll have the option to ask questions, and this event will also be available to watch back on YouTube, and it will also be transcribed as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Innocent, who will now moderate the rest of this event.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sazizo, for the introduction and for the house rules. Hi, so I'm Innocent Ekejuba, and just before we get straight into it and like bring up our guest Adéọlá, I would like to say a couple of things about this program. So the idea of this program is basically to help artists and arts practitioners, cultural producers, to come to terms with the relationship between art and money in different sense. And across the next 5 events we're going to be discussing or rather looking at the relationship between art and money from different points of view. Today we're looking at artists and discussing with our on the relationship between art and money from the point of view of the artist, and that's why it's, yeah. So Adéọlá is an artist with photography, video, sound, and installation. Much of our artistic work and the social life. Our works have been shown in festivals, museums, and galleries in many countries. She recipient of the dedicated Grand Prize Award for Best Photographic Creation at the 12th Morocco International Biennale of Photography in 2018, Lagos Photo Festival Award in 2012, and the Young Art Support National Award in 2013. Ọlágúnjú was one of the edition of Focus Platform Berlin 2020. And on a personal note, I've also known Adéọlá, well, I've known of Adéọlá's work since 2014, and I've always joining us today. Hi, Adéọlá, can you hear me? You're on mute.
Hi, Innocent. Thank you for the introduction. I mean, I lost you for a bit. I imagine your connection's a bit slow.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you very much for the for the introduction. I'm very honored and delighted. I consider it a privilege to be here today, and I look forward to this beautiful conversation.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we've done the formalities, I would like us to get like straight into it, like right into it. right? And this conversation, hustling or struggling, is something that I've had with a lot of friends, and I've had with a lot of colleagues. I've had with different persons in different spaces in the Nigerian and African art space, and we've also had conversations about this too, right? And so there is always this idea of there being um, an artist in two ways, right? So most people are either doing art as the core of what they are doing, like full time, and on the other end, there are people who are moonlighting as artists, right? So how does this particularly affect the financial well-being of artists from an artist's point of view? Should an artist focus solely on their hustle as an artist, or should they continue the moonlighting by the side in order to supplement their existence?
Thank you very much for your question, Innocent. I mean, I think it's very interesting. So this will depend on who you ask, and also the stage of the artist. And I mean, if an artist is starting out and you don't have any means of sustenance, I think it's very difficult to be a full-time artist. And I think it's very important to be able to feed yourself and put a roof over your own head. Hunger is a fast track to desperation. Hunger is a fast track to desperation. So if an artist is starting out, you must think of, how do I sustain myself? What else can I do while I try to figure myself out, not just as a human, to find my own artistic voice, and what can I do, to sustain myself. And so it's very tricky to, I'm going to speak from the context of, I haven't lived in Nigeria and been in Nigeria myself, where I know also that we don't have a lot of structures that, supports like, start out artists to say, oh, you go in, be a full-time artist, and nobody knows you, nobody knows your work. You don't even know yourself, because this is also a journey. And so how do you sustain yourself, at the end of the day? So yeah, I believe it's possible to, work on the side, find a way to, do some work to fund your own project. It's also a journey to self, learning and perfecting your skill. I do believe everyone has the gift and the possibility, to be an artist. Everyone is creative, but not everyone can become a professional artist, because you need a different skill set, which takes years to cultivate. And so you must do the basic, which is like, I must be able to provide for myself. I must be able to put myself in a space where I can think for myself, and that comes with like, doing whatever it is you need to do on the side until your craft is lucrative enough for you to live on. And, if you get lucky, you get there. If not, you still have to juggle, all these two jobs or these other jobs, as a way of, moving ahead or getting to wherever it is you want to get to as an artist.
Yeah, speaking as someone who also dabbles into like a number of things myself, like beyond just art, I also like dabble into tech and related. I also see the advantage of that. But some of the consensus and things are for me, and this is something I've worried about personally, is often, am I paying enough time? Am I paying enough attention to this part of myself? I mean, the whole idea of being a jack of multiple trades. Does one part of my life cannibalize on the other? The process of pursuing or moonlighting or pursuing other hustles, does that affect the way the artists invest time into their craft as an artist, or as a creator, or as an art practitioner? Does that take away from that? And at the end of the day, I think sometimes people just see it as constant cycle of struggling, right? Like in the morning you work, you do a day job, in the night you work on your crafts, and then that goes on and on, and that takes away personal time and all of these things. Which is one, like, why is this? Why does it seem like, unlike most other fields, it seems like the artist is always struggling?
Thank you very much, Innocent. I mean, I think the life of an artist is not it's not one of the easiest one. And I do believe that, you know, personally, art is some sort of calling. I mean, there must be something that motivates you outside of, like, you know, the financial gain, because these things are not promised to anyone, you know, and some people get lucky, some don't, and some people get big, some people are just average, you know, and that's like, it is what it is. But I do believe also that being creative, being gifted is also not enough, you know, for, you know, an artist. You have to understand the ecosystem, which, if you find yourself, you know, in a place where this does not even exist, you have to invent and construct this ecosystem as to, you know, according to your own personality, your own person, according to how you make the rules of how you want to create your work. And you have to learn, you know, learn, how does this work? What kind of work do I want to make? And whose sensibilities do I need to, appease, you know, for instance, if I want to work, you know, intellectually and conceptually, and I find myself in a space where those kind of expressions are in a way stifled, I might struggle. And so I have to look at, you know, my craft to say, oh, do I need a gallery? And if I will work to a point where a gallery sees me as valuable, how much work do I need to, you know, put into my craft? And so this takes us away from just being an artist who is in the studio. You're thinking, oh, how do I think as an artist, and, you know, probably apply the methodology of an engineer. So it's almost impossible to, you know, say, I'm just going to wake up 12 noon and do whatever it is, you know. I mean, personally, I always take the methodology of this 8 to 5 to say, if I work for someone, you know, which means I'm expected to deliver 40 hours in a week. And so I take this practically into my own craft as a person. And I mean, I don't sit down, and I don't believe artists should sit down and always wait for inspiration, because these things sometimes never come. And so, and it takes a level of structure and also discipline to say, I mean, I must contribute something to myself, and also fine tune my own language, and begin to think of my craft as much more serious than just, you know, hobby, and also, how do I translate this thing into something that is sustainable? And so, you know, then a new language must be learned, which is business, you know. And I guess that's also like one of the major problems for us as artists, because we just want to be creative, but we don't understand, like, how does this work? You know, how does the food chain works? You know, do I want to be 100% commercial? I just want to make my work, and, you know, I find the galleries to represent me. I want my work to go into phase. Or so I want to, you know, work conceptually, and, you know, and work with institutions, museum. And if I want, or if I need to enter into the spaces, what do I need to do? What language? Because, you know, that's also another thing which is very important, you know. How do we situate our work within language, you know, within a structure? Because, you know, all these things already exist. And sometimes we don't necessarily fit into whatever exists, but then we need to find our own way into the spaces to say, you know, oh, I think I want to be shown, or I want to be seen in this space, but what do I need to get there? And so these are things which are not readily available to you as an artist until you look for these opportunities. Sometimes it requires, you know, learning, going back to school to, you know, get more knowledge, you know, about your craft, and also fine tune your own skills, you know, sharpen your own visual senses, and also learn to, you know, articulate yourself, speak about yourself, speak about your work, and, you know, present your own work, you know, to whichever audience you think your work, you know, appeals to. But yeah, the struggle will always be there, you know, at the initially. Anytime, you know, it doesn't matter if you're starting a business, you know, you have to go through like the drill. I mean, we call it street credibility. You have to pay your street dues, and that's like standard. And above all, I don't mean to be like a pessimist, but, you know, nothing is still promised. So one, you know, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't, but, you know, the work also must go into it. But you know, I believe the struggle is also part of the craft. And so if you decide to be an artist, it's like, you know, full package, you know, is what one, you know, must learn, you know, to deal with.
Yeah, thank you. I some also understand how to do this struggle, well, how to balance your struggle, so to say, is also being able to understand what effort and what energy you should put into one thing or the other. And in that to understand and balance these things out, you need to be able to identify the things that are just consuming your resources and the things that are repaying for the amount of resources you put into them, right? And this means that you can't necessarily do your work, be it as an artist or as a creator or as a producer. You can't do your work for everyone because not everyone is your audience, right? So how do people hone in beyond the general and audience so as to avoid, you know, spending a lot of energy trying to get everyone on board a ship that can fit everyone.
The connection was really bad, so I wouldn't say I completely get the question. So I think it's safe to say you have to say that again because you were off and on. Thank you.
All right. So my question is, considering that you have to be careful of how you spend your energy and the amount of audience you give your energy to, because you don't want to hustle yourself into the ground. So it's important to pick your audience, right? So that you know that this is who you're speaking to, this is who you're creating for, this is who you're producing for, this is who you're making work for. How do you hone in to the general? Because I think it's a common thing to want to reach out to as many people as possible. But then doing this would kind of take up a lot of energy. So if artists and practitioners need to be careful, they have to define their audience, from my understanding. How do they get to do this properly?
I guess I mean we have to answer your question from a very personal point of view, and in my case I not particularly clear if I personally go looking for audience. I think my effort or most of my effort goes into making my work. However, I do believe I would like my work to reach as many people as the work needs to reach, but I have no capacity or even the expertise to make that happen by myself. And so I realized that I have to jump on the cushion or the shoulders of a lot of platforms like festivals and biennales, which attracts different kind of audiences. And so in my practice, it's very important for me to apply for these opportunities to be in these different spaces, and do my work, and also look into how do I take my work also out of the white cube and not just put it in the space where it's like hyper intellectualized, but also take it into public spaces where people who are not from my world, who don't speak the language of art, also engage with this work. So I also believe in taking my work into public spaces, and so that is how I relate to my work and also my craft. So I don't necessarily I don't pay conscious attention into who needs to see it, who's not important, and all this. But my attention goes into making the work and putting in artistic spaces, and also thinking about the fact that I need other people to see it who are not from our world or the art world.
Thank you. So like some years ago, you kind of changed bases primarily, not that you left. I refuse to think of it as you left because you didn't leave us. But you kind of shifted bases to primarily being in Europe, in Germany, and I'm curious about the difference between the cultures of care that exist in Nigeria and African art space, as opposed to the cultures of care that exist in other places, right? Because the way to I believe personally believe that one of the ways to also ensure that your hustle is not in vain is if you have systems that support you, right? So how do Nigeria and other African countries care for the creatives, and how better can it be from their experience?
Thank you very much for the question. which I think is very, very, very interesting. While I cannot speak for other African countries, with Nigeria, I think one of the best thing Nigeria has ever done for anyone is to give, is to give us the gift of resilience and courage. It gives you gut. And I know that, that doesn't sound like care in the context of, whatever it is we're talking about. But, one of the things which interests me, not just as an artist, but as a person, is to look at chaos as a productive act. And I think, navigating the chaos of a place like Nigeria as a creative, um, when one is in the situation, it's difficult to see that, this is actually helping me and, building me up one way or the other. But when you step outside of, the borders of Nigeria, and you find yourself in the same, in a different space, and, this resilience, this gut, this courage, which, Nigerian kind of birth in you as a creative follows you everywhere, helps you, navigate different terrain, helps you find your own identity in the pool of different things which is going on. You're able to stand in your own light as a person. And I think, in a way that's a form of care, which one gets to, appreciate in hindsight. Of course, it's a very different context, being in Europe and being in Nigeria, everything is different in a whole lot of ways. Yeah. One can say this, the structure, this, here, which already exists, and, this already culture, this tradition, this like how things are done and in different institutions doing different things. But also, I mean, for a foreigner, that also poses a different challenge to begin to say, where do I fit in this space, which in a way it's not for me, and and how do I find my own self and find my own artistic voice, and also maintain agency, in this kind of space, and I believe this is a constant dialogue, which one needs to have, and also every time one confronts institutions which have been for a very long time. But I mean, this is not to say I have like a specific answer as to, what can happen and what cannot, but I believe, in a space like Nigeria, we need to start building our own communities, our own, because of course, the state, which is not doing so much for, the other arts now, also puts the responsibility on us as creatives, as cultural producers, as artists, to start, creating our own structures, and be it formal, informal. I mean, I guess one of it is why I'm here today. The drill. It's also like, this is also like, cultivating care. Thinking about the artists, wanting to know how does the artist function, and how do they create, or whatever it is they have to say. And so we need to start, creating our own communities, and having, this conversation, because I believe in the power of dialogue. I believe in the power of, coming together to, to make something. And, it does not necessarily have to be, we have to work with our own resources, whatever it is that we are, wherever we are, and begin to, think about caring for our own voice, because which I believe this platform is doing, is caring about the voice of the creatives, both locally and in the diaspora. And I guess, this is what I can say now on this theme.
Yeah, thanks. So the last the Drew event we had, which was on collaboration and networking, we had Louise, German, and Niklapo as our speakers. And there was something German touched on, and something we actually did speak about later on that also kind of left a lot of thoughts on my mind, which was the absence of an enforceable cultural policy in Nigeria, and how he has for years, since he started working with Guardian Art as a journalist, been pushing for cultural policies to be implemented in order to better alleviate life, or make the artists or the art practitioners have a more sustainable lifestyle and life, in a sense. And and I found it very shocking, because German has been doing this push since the 1980s, And here we are in the 2020s, and there is still nothing. There's nothing to write home about. In fact, according to him, he had already even written drafted documents on these cultural policies, and there is nothing to write home about yet. And it makes me wonder: is this like a progressive? Is it an unnecessary thing, or is there an impact that such a cultural policy would definitely have? Because, like you said, one of the things that Nigeria gives Nigerians is gives us the ability to survive and to go out anywhere and push. But do we necessarily have to always be at odds with the system? Do we always have to be in that fight mode at always? I mean, what exactly has been the impact of this lack of an enforceable cultural policy in Nigeria?
I mean, I believe the lack of whatever it is that we lack in Nigeria is also what places us in a situation of, taking personal initiatives to try to do things ourselves. I mean, I sometimes make a joke like, there's a whole lot of anarchy, things going on at home because your own government on a own level, you generate your own electricity and your own water, your own this and that, and this is like outside of cultural policy. And so I feel the state is much more obsessed with like economic issues. And so culture is like the last thing on the list. People are not thinking about heart when they're trying to feed. And so it places me in a situation personally where I kind of like don't invest so much of psychic energy into like, oh, when is this going to change? When is the state going to look into culture? But I'm going to take Nollywood, which is a very good example. This started with people who had dreams and who kept working at it, even when they didn't have the tools. They worked with what they have. And so this is like a very big industry now. And so also like the music industry, people made music in their garage, in their rooms, and worked. And now the industry is so big, and in a way the state is also buying into it. And so I think as artists, as creatives, as we also have to start building our own ecosystem and with our resources, and start doing as much as we can do for ourselves without waiting for the state to implement whatsoever, cultural policies which we don't see happening. I mean, look at what you just said with, with what Jama said. I mean, I've also known Jama to be in this sector for forever. And, if nothing is changing, we are not going to wait. We actively, contribute in our own way. We have skills. I mean, I started teaching because I think it's important to nurture minds because, I feel like, that's like the greatest of wealth. And I believe like, it is individuals like us who also goes into politics in a place like Nigeria. And so if we start educating ourselves right now and doing whatever it is that we're doing, if one of us makes it into politics, for instance, then we have better chance of, people effecting favorable policies for the arts. But then I try not to waste so much time being trapped in this, what is not happening, because of course, what is not happening has not been happening forever, and start looking into possibilities of what can happen if we start, doing something individually and also collectively, as small groups. And I do believe like, all this effort put together can make changes, however little they appear at first.
Okay, so how do art practitioners work around all these constraints? I mean, I think on one end, it's and I try to always put myself in position whenever I speak to people. I mean, it's one thing for me to tell people you must go out and fight. It's another thing for me to tell them that this is how to fight, right? And yeah, I find personally I find that in a lot of situations that I've been in, there have always been people are always glad to tell us that you are the future of the country or you have so much potential. But very few people have been able to say this is the path you should consider, right? It's almost as if people are afraid of committing to specific direction, like being able to say turn right, turn left in that sense. So with all the constraints that exist in the Nigerian art scene, the African art scene, especially for early career practitioners who are just getting into the space, and with the absence of a structuralized culture of care, but rather would it depend us depending on ourselves to provide care for ourselves. How exactly what do you propose? How do you propose that art practitioners work around these constraints?
I do believe that nobody was given a blueprint, of how it is we have to navigate life, or even like, the art sector, you know, anyway, but also like in a place like Nigeria. And so personality also comes into it, individuality also comes to it. So if you come into the craft, you must also learn to find your own way outside of waiting for somebody to tell you what it is to do, which is the place of initiative and agency, and what works for me will not necessarily work for another person. And so, and what I'm trying to do, or how I'm trying to contribute to the culture, is also what I can speak boldly about, and so it's difficult to also stay in a space of like steering people where they should go, because it looks like it's helping, but then it's also like taking responsibility away from people. We're all in this in this pool, and we are all trying to find our own way. And so we've also have privileges to meet people who have been very helpful to us. Where people like Akimbodi Akimi, I was privileged to be in his masterclass. I've been also privileged to be in a lot of masterclasses, which have helped me. Simon Jami, and Chris Dacon, and all these people who I wouldn't meet on the street of Lagos. But through my work and never giving up, I was given the opportunity to learn from all these people. And so, it takes, but somebody saw the fact that I was making the effort and doing the work, and sent my portfolio, to these people who thought, oh, we should invite this person for this. And so there's that space of personal responsibility of finding your own, because if I want to learn how to speak, and I know I'm not particularly good, I would invest into, who is doing this that I think I want to, emulate or learn something for, and find a way to learn from them, either directly or indirectly, because that's also another thing, And so we're not totally. I don't believe we're totally trapped in this bubble where nothing is going to happen, and it's like it's not apocalyptic. I see a whole lot of possibilities, and I see people even doing things against the odds, which exist in these spaces, but I also don't subscribe to the thought of like, people needs to wait for someone to tell them what it is, they need to do. Everything that I feel drives me mad, and I feel, oh, I wish somebody helped me with this or told me this. It's also why I started teaching myself to say, you know what, I think I know something which I am able to share with people, and I do my own part. And so people who wants to learn, come. And they don't necessarily have to come. I feel like people can access knowledge, because internet democratize everything also. So even like we can learn a lot online or wherever it is. So it's a situation which is very tricky, that in an attempt to say, oh, we want to do this, it's important to be careful not to create another form of prison for people who are not able to also take initiative and begin to foster their own communities, even within themselves, and having conversation. This platform is doing that, and I believe you're still there in Nigeria, even with like the madness, like the internet and everything, the electricity. And so there's possibility, and it's not totally dark. I do believe
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I do agree with you to certain levels mostly. But I also think I need to also mention, because you mentioned earlier the need for communities, right? And I believe that when some of us, like I believe in solving problems for as many people as possible. I believe that in the quest to find a solution to your problem, I even though you shouldn't feed anyone, you shouldn't force feed anyone. I believe it is important to make the solution available to as many people as possible, which is also one of the things that best this platform. Some of these questions we struggle with personally, while we are searching for the answers. If we can bring as many people as possible along, um, we all face a lot of personal challenges that could also affect our access to information. All right. So there's always this big question, right, in the African art space precisely and the Nigerian art space also, which is, do I need to be here to make it? And a lot of time, everyone, it's always a case of, I mean, the normal, the saying is grass is always green on the other side. But considering the fact that if you do look at it closely, you could find structure and institutions in other countries um, that support artists, that support art practitioners. You could find grant funding. You could find even things like insurance and all of these things that actually could cater for artists, right? There seems to be more structure. And for this reason, in fact, this year alone, I know about 3 artists who have left Nigeria to go live somewhere else just because they feel stifled by the space. And which makes me wonder, is it necessary to switch location? Is it necessary to change your location in order to break even? Because it also seems like, and this is sad but true, but it seems like the biggest names in Nigerian arts, precisely, I will speak about Nigerian arts, are those who are able to exist in other places other than Nigeria. Recently, there was this joke someone made on Twitter about how Nigerians are doing great things all over the world, but not in Nigeria. It seems like we can't do great things in Nigeria, but if we want to change our location, we can do great things, right? And this also happens in the arts. Some of our biggest names in the arts, some, not all, are people who didn't necessarily live in Nigeria. And it seemed like being outside that space gave them the room to grow, right? And I can't speak for all African countries, but I also have friends in some West African countries who have the same sentiments, the same feeling. So how true is this? And how do we work around this? And given that you do have experience of this, so from your experience, how true is
this? Thank you very much, Innocent, for a very interesting and also tough question. But I mean, I guess one of the things or the first thing to say is that I do not believe that, Nigerians are doing well in the world and not in Nigeria. I believe that Nigerians are doing well, right from when they're there, in Nigeria. And that's number one. And the question of people moving out of the country is also a personal question. People have left for different reasons. I mean, some are out to study, and some on different level. But the Nigerian problem is also not peculiar to Nigeria. It's also a problem in different part of Africa, and also in other countries, not Europe, South America, the people from different, I mean, migration has always been a thing. People always looking for, what they call greener pasture, and environment enables them to do whatever it is they want to do. That exists also in a place in Nigeria. I mean, if you say, oh, I want to work in the arts, you wouldn't stay in Enugu, because a lot of all these things happens in Lagos. So you see a whole lot of rural urban migration also. So I mean, I tend to relate to all these things as people searching for better opportunities, and so of course I would never be against people who think, so I will have better opportunities if I move to a particular location. And just to also answer broadly, that it will be very ignorant to think that, oh, people move from Nigeria and then they find themselves in this space and then everything's falls on their lap. It's never like that. Living in other spaces also comes with its own challenges, which people never tell you about, which you never know until you find yourself in also in these spaces and having to deal and and navigate life outside of your quote unquote community of friends and family, and what you used to in your life. It's like a child who's learning to walk again, learning a new language, learning how to navigate life in a different space, appealing to different sensibilities and sensitivities. So it's always important to point that out. But I do believe essentially that there's that gift that Nigerian gives you, which is also what propels you, because it takes a whole lot of courage to even live anywhere, to decide, oh, I want to go. I mean, I want to live my life as I know it. I move into a different space. It takes guts. And so that I think it's also the gift the country gives you. So it's like easy to just get stuck in this, or what's not working, what's not, but a whole lot of things are not working in a whole lot of places. And I don't think Nigeria is also the worst place. You could be in Syria, you could be in Pakistan, bomb is going off. And, and then the question is, are you better than people, at war right now, who cannot even think about art? So I believe you being able to think of yourself as an artist or a creative or whatever it is you're doing, and sitting down peacefully, right now is also a level of privilege, which is very important to acknowledge, because it's so easy to get in this bubble and just get stuck. It's for me, it's always important to zoom out and look at the world, and also the way it's constituted, to say, actually, there's problem, and there are problems in also in different places. And we're still privileged in the sense that we have free speech in Nigeria. We live in a space where we can cuss out the president, and nobody shoots you before. I mean, that people don't have free speech in in other places. People can wear what they want in other places. So it's important to look at also what we have, and not necessarily everything needs to happen outside of the continent. And even though I live now, in Europe, but whoever knows me knows how many times I come to Nigeria, because it's also important, and it's not just because it's not just for familiar, but the space is important for me. It's always important to look at what is going on there, to stay connected to what is going on, there, because it's where I belong. It's also where I'm from. And so, and for me, I have like a definition of home which has nothing to do with geography also, and or also architecture. And so which, so I might be here now, but I know whatever is going on in the artscape, or even the landscape, or in the political scape of a place like Nigeria, we always be very important, and which is why it's important to be there. I've been there this year, in the pandemic or no pandemic, so I'm there almost every year, so it's I mean, I guess this is what I can say about, like, the whole thing about migration, that people are migrating, even within Europe, people migrate all the time. And so if you think life offers you a better opportunity in a different place, please take it, and it has nothing to do with the fact that, you can also still succeed, and even if you go into the spaces and succeed, you already add that fire that, in you as a Nigerian, within Nigeria. So please, it's not like, again, I will say again, it's not totally dark in Nigeria. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So time is fast going, but I just wanted to cover some. So from one end of dealing with of having to always constantly be in the struggle as an artist, to having to also deal with providing care for yourself and cultivating your community and your culture of care by yourself. It's something it could often lead to is a sense of desperation, right? A system where you take on jobs or you sign on contracts that may not necessarily be favorable to you, but you don't have the luxury to review these things or to refuse these things. And while I hope that later on in this series of talks with some of our other speakers, we can cover why some institutions put artists and art practitioners into this state of desperation, I also think it's important for us to speak to it as an artist yourself. Not to suppose, but I mean, I have been in such situations myself, and I would assume that most art practitioners have found themselves at one point or the other in such situations where, due to desperation or due to need or lack or thereof of resources, we sign on or we take part in things that we don't necessarily feel happy about. And we start blaming ourselves for putting ourselves in such a situation. So what do you do? How do you how do you treat such period? What are the do's and the don'ts that you do in such times of desperation, either to avoid putting yourself in tricky situations or to get yourself out of such tricky situations?
Thank you very much, Innocent. So we with the subject of desperation here is also another tricky one to to answer just directly and say, oh, you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that, because it's not so straightforward, and it's not so, so sometimes not so easy to acknowledge this desperation within ourselves, as artists. And then, which will always take me back to artists having agency, and that comes from a place of like having the basics, being able to sustain yourself, like being putting your making sure that you are able to feed yourself, because when you're not, when you know that, oh, I mean, we always have roof, which means like I can pay my rent, and then I will always have food on my table. It takes a lot of pressure also off you, and gives you that space to think and reflect. And I know reflection is like, sounds like some sort of luxury, especially if you find yourself in a place like Lagos or Nigeria and you're creative, and so and also because like there's not a lot of resources going around, like we're not living in abundance when it comes to like even like art spaces or even projects and all these things. And so this opportunity, quote unquote, comes your way, and you're like, oh, but I want to be part of this. And then the terms are not really favorable. And then you're like, oh, but I need this, So it's, so I do believe like, personality and what we want for ourselves, we always also come into play, because sometimes, people will do something which doesn't bother them, and, and then you find yourself like, I cannot do this, which also means, it's also a personal thing. You decide, I don't want to be part of this show because the contract is not favorable to me, and another person does not care. So it's also difficult to put it under an umbrella. But I mean, I will always speak from my own personal experience to say like, I knew I had to work, I have to work on the side to, to put myself in a space that I know that I would always have that basic dignity of shelter and being able to, feed myself. And that allows me to take a level of distance to whatever, quote unquote, comes to me that presents itself as an opportunity to see, to look through it, to say, I don't think this is an opportunity. And, that takes a whole lot of, also patience to be able to wait for what you really want. Because I mean, I can remember clearly, like for years, that I wasn't doing a whole lot of projects because things which were coming were not what I wanted to do, and it felt like this is a dry land. If you don't take this, nothing else is going to come. But I put myself in that whole situation to say, this is not for me. And it's as though the moment I realized like I wouldn't do certain things, I also allow the universe or whatever it is to allow what belongs to me comes to me as a person, and also as an artist, and also compromises are like really tricky things. So they're not totally white and black, because there's sometimes where you find yourself in a situation where you have to make little compromises. And of course, if you have to work with institutions, you have to align your interests also with the institution. So sometimes it's not going to be 100%, this is what I want. And so, but you have to look at it to say, how am I selling out? Can I live with this? Can I not live with this? So it's not going to be 100%. And sometimes, if it's for you, it's for you. And sometimes if it's not for you. But of course, this also takes experience and also, years of like learning. So sometimes you make bad decisions. This happens, I've made it. And then like, oh, I think this is not the best. I will do better the next time. And then also it's like learning on the job. So, things we always like come that way. And then we just have to find a way to, learn from it and move on.
Yeah, thanks. I think you kind of already covered a bit of what I was going to ask next, which is basically how to earn money without letting go. Because I think one of the key things we have to do in such a situation is also to hold on to an agency, right? Because that's what kind of helps you, this ability to still have your voice and to not let your voice be lost to yourself, is what helps you distinguish what you're accepting and what you're not accepting. And as a number of artists have told me recently, it's also good to know that you can always say no, right? And even if that's the only thing you can say, it's an important. It's just two letters with a strong enough word. It could be a difference between depression and no depression, as the case may be. Being able to say no to some situations. So I'm going to throw the question open to the platform open soon. But first, I think I have one more question, and then we'll go on a break, and then we'll come back and whatever questions anyone in the audience might have would be able to take it. And this is a very like so how just is a how question. Oh no, it's not a how question. Is it possible? Is it possible? And I ask this because is it possible to break the cycle of living hand to mouth for an emerging artist, for an early career art practitioner? Um, Violent care art practitioner. So is it possible to break that cycle? Because on one hand we have people who work in different industries being able to, save up properly because they have the assurance of monthly income. Right, but in this space there is no assurance of such a situation. Even if you're a producer who works for some organizations in Nigeria, for example, you are only guaranteed income when there is uh, a, a, a rich project. The project pays your income, and then every other time you basically, whenever there is money or whatever amount is there, and it's becoming more and more difficult for us to have sustainable institutions for that reason. So, is it possible for the individuals, the art practitioners, the creators, and the artists themselves, is it possible for them to break that cycle of having to live hand to mouth? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much, Innocent. Anything is possible. I guess that's what I can say. Anything is possible, but I do believe it takes work, to get wherever you need to get. Even if you start out, if you're not an artist and you start out your career, you need years to grow. I mean, people always start pay jobs and say, oh, I don't have good salary, and then you grow from it. But so I also believe that the art or the artist also needs strategy to apply, which comes from learning how do I translate or this passion and this gift and this work into something that sustains me, that gives me financial remuneration, and also learn the business of art, and it comes with like doing the work, number one, which is like the most the most important thing, and also learning how to navigate the navigate the art market. How does the ecosystem work? Who is on top of the food chain? What is my position in the food chain? How do I learn about the business of art? Who will take on my work? For instance, I mean, if you're in Nigeria, you make experimental film, and as an art form, it will probably be tough to find a gallery who takes on your work, because the space is not there yet. So there's still so much traditional forms of art and all those things going on with like galleries, and so it's always important to look for where can I find this opportunities that gives me space to create my work and also remunerate me. And also artists need to learn about contract, also how to self-represent, because if you're not in that stage where you find people who can represent you, you have to find a way to self-represent, and that also takes a bit of planning. And so it's so easy to get trapped in this artist world of like creating that you're so disconnected from the real world as it is, and you work all year round, and then you don't know that, oh, there's an opportunity that I need to apply for, or all these things. So it takes a bit of plan, you know. I mean, personally, I don't believe I have to create all year round. I have my creative season. I have a season of like, okay, I'm reading, I'm researching, and, you know, looking for opportunities and applying for it, you know, and you know, growing myself. And also over the years, you also acquire skills in doing, you know, being an artist and doing all these things, and you begin to think, how do I translate these skills, this knowledge, you know, into something that sustains me. I mean, I teach now, for instance, but I realize, of course, if I'm hungry, I will be like the least interesting person to be around, because I'm irritable when I'm hungry. So I cannot stand in front of someone and teach when I'm hungry. So I know I have to learn how to align my interests with institutions, you know, to find support for my project and say, you know what, this is what we want to do. And, you know, and then in that space, it also it provides income for me to, you know, feed myself, and also puts me in a better position to give what it is that I have to give, you know, to other people. So it's, you know, one must also find a way to like self-sustain until all this magic happens, you know. But it's I do not think it's automatic if you don't have like if you're not coming from wealth where, you know, you already have things, you know, that gives you some sort of leverage and all these things. But of course we have to work, but I do not believe it is impossible to make it as an artist.
Thank you so much, Adéọlá. I think we'll just go straight into asking anyone in the audience if they have any questions or comments. And this is supposed to be an interactive session. I mean, well, this is supposed to be the interactive part of the session. So if the artist or you're a creator or you're a practitioner, whatever question you have, you could just raise your hand and then put on your mic and speak, so that we could, you know, maximize this time together. So anyone with any question?
Hi, can you hear me okay? It's Louise here.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Innocent Adéọlá, so much for your openness and sharing your experiences. I suppose I just wanted to ask you both, really, was there anyone who kind of at the early stages of your careers, what was the inspiration to kind of keep going at moments of kind of struggle, and what was it that kind of motivated you, or was there somebody that gave you some great advice at an important moment, or where do you find your resilience, I suppose, is the question.
Who goes first? Innocent?
So no, Adéọlá will go first. She's our guest.
Thank you very much, Louise. In my case, I guess my art is, you know, is born out of, you know, passion, and I had to answer important questions to myself early on, when I know, like, to look at it as, since nothing is promised to me, I might achieve commercial success and I may not, you know, but will I still be an artist if nothing ever comes from this? And, you know, so I got to that point where I knew this is very important to me. It's important to create. It's important for me to be in the space of creating. You know, it's a passion. And so I answered to myself that even if nothing comes, even if I don't make it as an artist or nothing happens, I will still be an artist. And so being able to answer that for myself places me in a place where I know, I'm in this for life. And so that's also helps me, you know, redefine and also manage my craft and find people who will help me get better. We always keep mentioning the photographer Akimbodi Akimbi, who's been very, you know, supportive, you know, even if it's like, even on a very personal level of like, I just want to rant, and I will mention Uncle Jide Adeniyi Jones, who, you know, those people, two people were really, you know, really fundamental to my artistic career and the choice, and not just professionally but also personally, because another thing is, like, artists need people who can listen to them rant, and we don't have a lot of that, which takes me back to what Innocent was speaking about cultures of care, where how we need to create our own communities of, like, even if it's just come and talk about like life problems or career or work problems. It's always important for that space. So those people were always there to call them and say, oh, I don't understand these things. What do you think? Or just rant about how bad the traffic was in Lagos today, and how there was no electricity and all those things, and all those things. And so yeah, and of course I have a whole lot of mentors who I've never met, from books, from film, from everywhere, who I look at what it is they do. I try to research when they began, and what the journey was like for them, and use that as something to motivate myself when I feel like, did I make the right choice or not? Thank you.
Yeah, I think mine is, I mean, there are a lot of intersections there, because also Uncle Jide Evangeline Jones is also one of the important persons. Like he's a huge supporter of progress, I must say. So he's one of the people I also rant to. But I think what has pushed me the most is also having people who are willing to tell me the truth to my face, regardless of what the truth might be. From time to time, I speak with people like Koyo, the director of Zeit Mocha, Kate Fowl, the director of Buma PS1. And the reason I speak to them is because I know no matter how bad the situation is, no matter how bad the idea is, whatever it is, they would tell me the truth to my face. Not because they don't care, but because they care enough to want me to be better off. And it's important to me that I have this kind of people around me, because I think at the end of the day, the worst we can do to ourselves is say yes to mediocre, even for ourselves. So mediocrity, rather, even for ourselves. So the ability to be able to find the right people, to have the right people in your corner is important. I believe the most important currency to have is human and not necessarily money. Money is needed, but if you have the right people in your corner, the money would be magnified. It would get it further. So in that sense, while I can't say this is a specific thing, but just being able to have people to turn to when I'm at my lowest is always key to be able to push on. I haven't reached anywhere. I still have a lot of things. I'm literally just getting off the ground. But knowing that there are people who are cheering on you, and I think this is important for every producer, culture producer out there. So always don't necessarily have the yes people in your corner, but find the right voices that you need at very varying times. Yeah, that's my 2 cents on this. So Louise, I hope we're able to answer your question. Does anyone else have any other question? We still have like 11 minutes left.
Yeah, I was quite interested in, I think when you were both speaking about location and like relocating and opportunities. Obviously, you're living in Germany now, Adéọlá. And do you find, I mean, I know that there's pros and cons with kind of, different locations and opportunities, but do you find in terms of like opportunities of to exhibit or to kind of showcase your work more, where have you found those opportunities to be kind of more fruitful, if that's the right word or term? And I suppose not just in terms of financial support, but maybe kind of like organizational support as well, like other in-kind support that you've been offered as an artist.
Thank you very much for the question. I guess in my case, I was lucky to, come in to Europe, where I already have things going on for me as an artist. in Nigeria. So majority of the things which I've had to do when I arrived, still, came outside of Germany because, of course, I needed time to integrate into like the new system and also find myself like learn the system and learn how the system works. But so far, I mean, I am grateful to find a level of acceptance also in Germany with like my last project, which was there in Berlin, and also like a couple of things which I'm yet to do, but of course I do believe the space is opening up, and I know that what contributes to that was like the level of work which I've done before I arrived, so I wasn't totally upskill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. I see Nyacho is in the audience. Nyacho, do you want to ask that question? Nyacho is also one of those persons I call from time, going back to Louise's question. It's also one of those persons I call from time to time just to rant about the situation in Lagos.
I don't. Hello, everyone. I'm Nyacho. Pardon my lateness. There are several reasons behind that. I don't have any specific questions to ask.
Okay. Awesome. All right.
I have another question. Sorry, or for,
yeah, go ahead.
For Adéọlá, like what would your three, sorry to put you on the spot as well, but what would your three, like if you had like could give advice to someone who's up and coming, like what 3 tips would you kind of give to like an up and coming artist in terms of like navigating the arts and kind of that balance between kind of taking care of themselves and making sure that they are able to feed themselves as well?
Thank you for your question. I guess the first one would be that, I think every artist must understand their inherent value, not just as human, but as an artist, because that also helps one stay in balance to know that, you know what, I bring value with me as an artist. I am taking risk and, constantly creating a new work and learning how to get myself better. That helps one stay in balance and also maintain, a level of, I believe, sense of self when you go out in the world and you see a whole lot of things which sometimes will confuse you and sometimes will intimidate you. But you always go back to knowing that you have this inherent value as a person and as an artist. And the second one is to never do anything from a place of desperation. Always find a space to breathe and reflect about choices, because of course the life of an artist is not an easy one, and there we always be a situation and circumstances that makes your art skip, and you don't know, oh, should I do this, or is this good for me and not. And of course the third one is to keep doing the work, and sometimes some work are very fast, some are very slow, and so sometimes you might do the work that it looks like, oh, nobody really likes what I'm doing, nobody, maybe I'm not good enough. Never put yourself in a situation whereby you begin to second guess yourself. Keep doing the work. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It will. Somebody will say it, and also I believe the work has a life of its own. It will always look for his own audience also, and so those are like the things that guide me personally, and so it's also what I can say to whoever a young artist starting out. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
go on.
I actually have a question. because you just mentioned something about valuing yourself as an artist or finding. I want to know, I don't know if this is something you've spoken about already. Again, my apologies if you have. How did you find value as an artist? Like, how did you find value in yourself as an artist? Because coming up in the art world, there are expectations, there are a lot of things that emerging artists, I don't know whether to say have on their minds, or things that perhaps push them in different directions. I don't really know how to articulate, but there is sometimes a struggle in finding value as yourself in as an artist in the world we live in, or the art world we navigate. So how did you find value in yourself and in your work as an artist?
The journey to value for me consciously, as an artist, started when I decided, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be an artist. There's no going back. This is my craft. And I had to sit down to, take stock, and begin to think differently, not just as somebody who likes to create and make work and all this. And I began to think around, like, how do I sustain myself? And so, of course, the question of value also comes into it, because if I want to live as an artist, survive and navigate the world as an artist, I must be able to sustain myself. And so the question of dignity also comes into play for me, to say, how do I not be a sellout in such a way that I sacrifice myself, my self-esteem, in the name of trying to also put food on my own table? And so all this came up, and I had confusion as to how to navigate it, and I began to study, and also I believe, like, with art and also with artists, it's almost very difficult to differentiate your life and your craft, because everything seems to be interwoven, and I have to look, approach, myself as a person to and in relation also to the work which I'm making, to say, what, this is important, and I'm important, and I must establish my place, in the art market, from a place of, like, what, this conversation is happening because I have made the work, and not the other way around. And that helps me with, like, if I have to deal with, institutions, if I have to deal with people, if I have to deal with requests. And so sometimes some things even come which bring monetary value, but it's very condescending, and this I find myself rejecting, because I'm like, I will take this money, but I will never be happy because I know this insults me, And so that value for me also transcends material value. It transcends if somebody is going to pay, but, what is the language? Does he contribute to how I want to see myself, or does it contribute to a certain stereotypes which I'm trying to take away myself? And this comes from, also practice, because sometimes, I feel like, oh, maybe I was stupid not to have taken this thing. Maybe I should have not. But, I always also trust my own gut and also my own intuition around choices when it comes to, things which I have to do. And if I feel, oh, this does not feel right to me, I do not, jump on it. It's not an opportunity for me. And that, it took time, it's not something I knew from the beginning. It took the more I work, the more I realize, so I don't want to put my work in this type of context. I don't want to put my work in this type of space. I don't want to work in this type of way, just because it's not the truth for me. And, that might not apply to another person, but I also have to find what works for me as a person, and also what works for me as an artist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Adéọlá. Thank you, Nyacha, for the question. So, yeah, we're right on time. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. Saizo, do you want to do the honors?
Yes, thank you so much to everyone for joining and for listening through. Thank you to those who attended on Zoom and for those who've attended the event on YouTube as well. Just to let you know that this is the first in a series of events looking at art and money. So the next event will take place next week, next Tuesday, around the same time, between 2:30 and 3 p.m. And these events will take place up until the 24th of August. So do feel free to register on. If you've already registered on for these events via Eventbrite, you'll get a reminder a couple of days before the event with the link. And for those attending this event through Zoom, you will be, you can just use the same link. So this is the link that we'll be using for all of the sessions as well. And if you have any questions at all, do feel free to get in touch with us at attention@thedrill.org. Something that I forgot to do at the beginning of this event was just to thank our supporters, Derby Quad and Format International Festival. So they've been supporting this event. So I just want to say a massive thank you to them for giving us this platform to put on this series as well. And of course, a massive thank you to our speaker today, Adéọlá, for sharing her experiences and lots of nuggets of wisdom as well. So thank you so much for today. And so enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we shall look forward to seeing you all next Tuesday and for the remainder of the series. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Adéọlá.